Well, this is exciting. I'm glad we've got 14 people on today, and maybe more, maybe less, but and I do wish we could do little breakout rooms because one of the things that is a challenge for me doing these is that all of the lesson plans that we have in our book that's called Strong, Teaching the Strengthening Families Protective Factor Framework to Parents and Professionals, is that the lesson plans are very interactive and they really depend a lot on the trainer or the presenter of the lesson plans. They have a good, strong background in the protective factor framework, which I'm hoping all of you have. And if you don't, there's a lot of ways to get it. So that you can guide discussions and things. So we will do some discussion questions. This lesson plan can take quite a long time to do. And in fact, one of the things that I like about it is that it's so apropos to home visiting, because one of the things that we know is that so much of what we are as parents comes from the family culture that we grew up in. So what I'd like to start with, well, I'll start with what well, now for heaven's sakes, now my little buttons aren't working. Here we go. Okay. So as Roger said, 5 protective factors keep families strong, and the good news is we have them all. And just as a reminder, the 5 protective factors are parental resilience, healthy social connection, concrete support in times of need, knowledge of parenting and child development, and social and emotional competence. And one of the things that we're going to talk about today is how important all of these protective factors are to protect us from being overwhelmed by stress and to help families to be protected from being overwhelmed by stress. And we certainly are in a stressful time right now. So what I'd like to start with is, when you think of the word culture, what are some of the things that you think of? Roger, I also don't have access to the chat box down here. I don't have anything on the bottom. I normally do. So if
I'll
Roger,
monitor the chat for you. I will monitor the chat for you. No problem. I will fill you in.
So let's just start with just think of a word or two that you think of when you think of the word culture.
Art.
Oh, I see. Values just popped up. The things are popping up, but I can't get them in a list.
Food, dance, music, values, art.
Mm-hmm.
I just put family and community.
Mm-hmm.
People are welcome to open up and say their own things too, I think, right? You don't care if they're in a,
Sure.
our beliefs and values, vernacular.
Okay, so culture is the characteristics of a particular group of people.
And Whitney just added a defined set of values, priorities, and expectations that a group, organization, or family share. And Karen Goddard put in social circumstances.
Okay. So that also goes along with the customary beliefs and the norms of a racial or religious or a group, the shared features of everyday existence in a place or time. I think this one really, really relates to the culture of whatever workplace we're in. You know, if you've had more than one job in your life, you know that there can be huge differences in the everyday existence of whatever culture you're in when you're in your workplace. Also, the shared values, attitudes, goals, and practices. And what I think is really important is that every family has its own culture. The culture that I grew up in may be completely different from the culture that you grew up in. And even one of the things that I understand is that I was talking to my sister the other day, and she has a whole different view of a lot of things that happened as we were growing up than I do. So two siblings in the same house can feel like they're in different cultures. So this is me. You can learn a little bit about my culture from my wedding picture there. Um, my name is Maureen Durning, and I'm the owner director of Butterfly Trainings That Transform. That's on my website there. And so this is what a wedding looked like in 1972 in a Catholic church in Cincinnati, Ohio. So um, the culture at the time, unfortunately, had those brown ruffled tuxedos. Um, I sometimes look at this and think, oh, why wasn't a gorgeous black tuxedo part of what we thought was good looking at the time? I remember my father saying he thought he looked like a Confederate Army general in this outfit. Um, so when I was thinking about culture, I thought, well, that kind of defines, a little bit of my culture. A white middle class young woman. I was 22 at the time when I got married, 48 years ago. So that's what a wedding
Maureen,
looks
there
like.
there were a couple of comments about your about the wedding. So
Oh, what did it say?
loving the groom's haircut,
Yeah.
Whitney says, and that is the best wedding photo. I love it. Same person
Oh,
from me.
that's sweet. That's sweet. Yes, it was a fun day. So here's some more fun days. Here's some other wedding photos. So just throw out either if somebody would like to say something. What can we learn about culture just from looking at this big variety of wedding photos of different locations, different times, different religions. Any cultural messages you can get from at these photos? They're all beautiful. Yeah, that's the truth. Yeah, clothing is a big part. Yeah, so much changes over time. That's the truth. And there are norms that are apparent. Oh, they're coming by quickly. Roger, do you
Okay.
want to?
Yeah. There are norms that are apparent in each individual culture that are apparent in our ceremonies and rites. Maria Rick says there are several different colors that represent the importance of the day. Karen Goddard says the day is important and persons feel special. So it's common to everybody.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so that's an example of some wedding. Here's some festivals and some food, So I was having fun looking up pictures of different kind of festivals and foods, um, um, and all the different flags and all the different colors and the different rituals that go along with different cultures. So I think you can see from this that there's lots and lots of surface things that are very important as far as defining culture, and the food, the music, the dancing, the art, all of those things are a big part of it. But there's also underlying beliefs and values that inform the type of food and music and art. Um, and culture plays a big part in what we become. So, Roger, I see a few more comments have come in.
Yeah, so I said food and music are important in all of them. And then I said, and then owner, I'm not sure who owner is. Who is owner? I think food is so important. Okay, it's Brenda. I think food is so important. It's one thing every human does, eat.
Yeah, that's the truth. Yeah. So, what I'd like you to think about right now is think of three words that would define the culture that you're in right now, or one of the cultures, because we're often in more than one culture at a time. So one of the cultures that you're in right now, think of three words and put those in the chat box. We'll see what kind of variety of cultures we have here.
So Lavina says, I like the distinction between surface things and the more in-depth and unseen things that influence our cultures. And Whitney says respect, hard work, kindness.
Mm-hmm.
Unity, family, kindness, supportive, inspirational, and fun. Acceptance, adaptation, a culture that isn't the same as your own.
Okay, if anybody else has more, one of the things I like about these responses is that often when we ask this question, people do stay very much on the surface. You know, like I said, I'm a white woman living in Idaho who loves German food, you know. But, you know, talking about those underlying values that you have. Oh, there is, oh, theater. Oh, I love you.
So Teresa Uhlenkot says theater, faith, connection. Karen Goddard says food, connection, appreciation. Brenda says rural, family, outdoors.
Okay.
Catherine Vincent says advocacy, family, education.
Okay. I hope the theater person got whatever we had to buy to watch Hamilton the other day. Everybody should buy whatever that is and watch Hamilton.
Teresa sent a smile, so I don't know. She said agreed. Agree with education. Yeah, 5 times. Oh, 5 times
Oh,
she said it.
times. All right. 5 is good.
Serious stuff.
Yeah. So what we're doing today is we're reflecting on the culture of our upbringing and then also see how it affects not only our parenting, but if we're working with people, you know, we're absolutely sure that the people that we're working with have a different culture than ours, you know, because like I said, every family has their own individual culture. So this is where I wish we could well, we already did this. 2 or more cultures in your life. So let's talk. Let's see if we can get a few responses here. How and why does culture contribute to who we become as parents? And this is consciously and unconsciously. I think a lot of the things in our culture are really below the surface. We don't consciously think about how the culture we grew up in um, is affecting our day-to-day life now. So let's just get a couple of out loud responses here. How and why does culture contribute to who you will become as parents?
There are a couple of chats, norms of the time, Karen Goddard, and our parenting styles, our discipline styles, another person says.
So I'm just going to throw out there, this is something that in our family we're really intentional about, because the way that I grew up, the kind of methodology was children are better seen and unheard, which I thought was kind of toxic, because I never really feel like I had an important place in my family unit. So as parents, we were really intentional and we defined specific values that we wanted to use to help our children learn how to guide their behavior when they deal with conflict or stressful situations. So those were the 3 that I put in there, because we felt like those are the 3 main things. With a foundation of love, those are the things that help grow a really well-rounded human. So and
that actually is exactly the point of exploring our family culture. The whole point of this is to be aware, and so we can be intentional. You know, we can't. Sometimes I've worked with families and with parents who somehow instinctively they know that they don't like something that they're doing as a parent and they don't know why. And so if you can get them actually thinking about, well, where did that attitude come from? then you can decide, okay, I can change it. And that is to me the big revelation of doing this exploring family culture, to realize you don't have to keep things that aren't serving you well anymore. So we can think of culture as an iceberg, and many of you have probably seen this before, that above the waterline, these are the things that we see. And then below the waterline is the underlying values and attitudes and beliefs that inform those things that you see. Why do we, looking at those festivals, why do we dress people up as Santa Claus? It's part of our culture of fantasy and of giving and of spreading love at Christmas time and whatever. So those are the underlying values that inform the things that we see. So
Maureen
go ahead.
Lavina gave a really good, thoughtful comment. She says, we tend to reflect the things we learned from our parents. We have the privilege of keeping things that are effective and discarding those that didn't work so well for us. We're influenced by the parenting styles our parents developed from their parents. It's a crazy cycle. Good parenting means cognitively accepting what works and modifying things that aren't working.
Okay. Yeah,
Very
that's
thoughtful.
it exactly. We could close now. But we won't. So let's talk about time. In this lesson plan, what we have is a whole list of different cultural influences. And when we do this in person with people, we will go through a lot of those and have people reflect on what they learned growing up, and do they want to keep it or do they want to change it. And it's always been interesting to me the amount of discussion that comes from talking about time. So in your family growing up, were you always on time? Were you late? Or were you somewhere in between? And I'd like for you to think about that, and also think about some of the underlying things that the underlying beliefs and attitudes that informed your family as to whether you were going to be on time, late, or somewhere in between. So I'll give you a minute to think of, early by 20 minutes. There you go.
Are you from the Midwest, Maria? Say, Maria, early by 20 minutes. Catherine Vincent says, always late, Whitney says. And Catherine says on time. No. Okay, she said, I said, are you from the Midwest? And she said, no, from southeastern Idaho. Emily says, at least a few minutes early. Let's see. Whitney says, no Olympian was ever more motivated to get a goal than me trying to get to the bus stop by 7:04. Family standard time was always a bit late, not late in my generation now, though. Teresa says, depended if we were with dad or mom. Another cultural issue, right? Jacqueline says, on time, with an exclamation point. Karen Goddard says, totally unorganized family, most likely late, don't remember. Florina says, late, always late. George Lopez, comedian, has a joke that the reason people in our culture are late is because we think it only takes 15 minutes to get anywhere.
It's funny, since I've been in Idaho, I've always been an early person anyway, but I'm even more early because I always in Ohio, it does take a half hour, or I usually 45 minutes to get anywhere. And so here we are in Idaho, where everything I go to takes 5 minutes to get to, and so I'm always a half hour early to everything.
Well, then you'd fit with what Savannah said. Savannah says, the rule was instilled in me. If you're early, you're on time. If you're on time, you're late. If you're late, don't bother showing up.
That's funny.
So these are differences of.
So it seems as though we've got mostly on time or early people here. There was somebody who was late. Another thing came up.
The military made me learn to be extra early too. Right, another culture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my husband was in the military, and he said they make you come really early so that you learn how to wait because you get there early and nothing started yet.
Well, that seemed to be what Catherine said is hurry up and wait. That's the motto, right?
Uh-huh. So, what are some of the underlying things that you think were going on in your family? The underlying beliefs and attitudes that that like for instance, my friend Jane, she says, she was Midwest. They always were super early, and it was because her mother, if she needed to get those kids to church, she did not want to look like a bad mother. So those kids had to be dressed and clean and ready and in church earlier than everybody else so that it would reflect on her as being a good mother who had it together. So that's a pretty deep meaning, a pretty deep reason why they had to be on time all the time or early. So, are there any other attitudes people can think about that would influence your decision or your here we go.
Uh,
Somebody said, Roger.
my mom always said that making people wait for you is not polite and not respectful of other people's time.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's an underlying value about time. What about those who are late? Does anybody have any underlying values that could come from being late?
I always think I have one more. I tend to be late, and I think about it like there's always one more thing I have to do before I leave,
Mhm.
and it always so that's the thing that keeps me from being on time.
Uh-huh.
Just one more thing.
Some of the things that have come up when we've done this is some people say, oh, well, we value living in the present. We're living in the present moment. We aren't that attached to time. Um, um, we're meeting immediate needs, or we didn't plan well, or one person that I talked to, and this was interesting, she said, well, we don't expect anybody to wait for us. We don't care if we miss. So like if you're meeting your friends for dinner and you're going to come late, she said, they can go ahead and start eating. I don't care. And so,
Right.
and those of us who were on time, we would never start eating until everybody was there. Just so there can be these culture clashes that come up. Did
So
something else pop
there are a few comments. Yes, there are. Let's see. We were always late because we always said a quote Bradford goodbye. I assume that was your maiden name. We love to chit chat. And then Whitney also says we came from a culture of busyness and getting things done. And Florina says
Mhm.
exactly. We pack a lot into one day, but we grew up knowing you could never be late to church or work. Whitney says there was also a lot about showing up presentable. Teresa says,
Mhm.
my husband doesn't like idle time. He thinks it's a waste of time, shows up right on time. And Carrie Palmer says to everyone, someone once said, instead of saying, sorry, I'm late, say, thank you for waiting because I know that I'm cutting into your time. Never late to church, LOL.
That's another thing that often comes up in discussions. People will say, "Oh, we were never late to church, but we were late to everything else," or we were never late to school, but it didn't matter if we were late to go to Ma's house or whatever. So there can be these underlying values that come out just talking about this. I think this has been a surprise for me, the amount of discussion that comes out of just talking about being later on time or somewhere in between. So I would say that this is a really, and it's kind of a neutral topic. It doesn't usually get people nervous about sharing or anything when you're talking about this, where sometimes other cultural like if you're talking about sex or religion or something, those can be cultural hotspots. So So if you're working with families and with parents, this can be a nice way to open up the idea of talking about the culture that you grew up in. So moving on, this cultural iceberg, and again, you've probably seen this, and unfortunately, it's hard to it's kind of too small to read all of these little things. But the things that are above the water are the obvious things like age, language, physical characteristics, and then things that are less visible. And this is about like an individual. Things that are less visible are their body language, their the festivals, the family traditions, the religious practices. And then when you get really down to not visible, you get into the worldview, personal beliefs, the thought patterns, assumptions that people have. So so this kind of brings up a good, let me see here. So we aren't gonna go through all of these. I think what I'd like to do within the lesson plan, we will discuss lots and lots of these topics that I'm gonna bring up. I think what I'm gonna do is bring them all up, and then let's pick one and do a little bit of what we did with time. Just talk about some of the cultural influences. So in your family's culture, think about what did you learn about feeding children? How adults react to a crying baby or to an older child? Who takes care of the children? What did people think about work for parents or work for children? Oh, this one gets me. Rules for boys versus rules for girls. I grew up in the 50s, and it was absolutely never once occurred to me that there was anything odd about this. Every Saturday, my two older sisters and I and my mom cleaned the whole house. We got paid a quarter a room for cleaning the house while my brother and father went out and played golf. And we thought that was fine. It's amazing. How to make money and how to spend money. What did your family think about education, about expressing anger, about the importance of religion, and about destiny? Do adults believe that things just happen to you or that you have any control of your destiny? So let's pick one of those topics. Whoever speaks first gets to pick a topic that we'll talk about. Which one rings your bell?
How about kids expressing anger versus adults expressing anger? Let's just go to the hot button.
Okay. Okay. So what do you think about that? As far as the thing that's above the iceberg, of course, is the actual physical manifestation of what it looks like to express anger. But what are the feelings and the beliefs and the attitudes underneath that iceberg that have to do with what you might have thought in your family's culture? Like, was it okay for children to express anger or not? Let's just talk about it, or put things in the chat box.
Kids expressing anger was seen as disrespectful, Whitney says.
Mm-hmm.
Not okay, Catherine says, because our problems as children seem trivial compared to adults' problems. And Karen said, children will do what they see in their household.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Oh, Lavina says, as long as the anger was controlled, my parents understood that we would get mad sometimes. Justin says, we sure could express anger, but my dad was great at reframing. Tell a little more on that, Justin. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Sorry, Maureen, I'm jumping in your space.
No, I'd just like to hear more
Justin,
about
go ahead.
that.
Dad was always very, very, very positive. Anything we said, kind of dismissive of my angry feelings. And sometimes, I guess now that I'm older, I realize that. And but he was always really good about making me look at things from a very positive perspective, because he figured you're alive, you're happy, you're healthy, you have a roof over your head. Let's be happy about that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I grew
Is
up in
that-
kind of an opposite house of some people. So my mom was really big on expressing your feelings to the point that it almost got annoying. Like, angry about that? Let's talk about that. So very different from a lot of families, but yeah,
I'm sorry, who was that?
that was Teresa.
Oh, hi, Teresa. Good. Let's see. So there's a bunch of things here, Maureen. We could express anger, but not against our parents or grandparents, says Brenda. Maria says, children expressing anger is throwing a fit. An adult expressing anger is to help the family improve.
Oh.
That's a big value point. That's a huge value point, huh? Carrie says, I would allow my children to always communicate how they felt, and I would say it is okay to be angry as long as they weren't hurting anyone. I would always ask, what can we do to control our anger? And then Florina says, we grew up learning that we were not to show any negative emotions. We did not discuss what happened in the home. Outside of the home, we always had to pretend it was all okay. Karen, I think, asks Justin, do you feel your dad listened to what you said? Oh, and Justin responds, okay, so he was lost a lot of the time and tried to be my friend instead of dad. Yeah. Yep.
So I can chime in here. My family was huge into multiple sports. I played 5 sports growing up, and so 2 of them with males on the team, or I actually played baseball with the boys. And my reactions had to be a lot more controlled than what was acceptable for the boys when it came to anger, even though I was pointed at, like guys would slide into me and try to cleat me if they were sliding into my base, or they would try to pitch at me, and things like that. So if I got mad and if I showed that anger, that was me letting them win, versus if they did it to one of the other boys and they got mad, it was okay. So a lot of times when it came to sports, it was just the expectation of being very stoic, and you could, vent or whatever it might be at home without an audience there. But if you did it on the field, or if you did it during a game or anything like that, then that was absolutely unacceptable. So there was a difference there, kind of, as far as expressing anger, just not even just as children, but that was just kind of the expectation across the board, is women express anger differently than men, because the expectation is that they're able to process their emotions better. So it was really interesting in that aspect for me.
Yeah. So I'm hearing lots of underlying values from these things. The difference between women and men when it comes to anger and other things. Somebody said that it was okay to do something. It was okay to do something in the house, but not outside the house. So that means you have to save face. You don't want your business to be shared. What's the phrase? I don't want to air your dirty laundry, for other people. So if you do this lesson plan, which is, I think it's on page 191 of the book, if you do this lesson plan, you can see that the conversations get really, really rich and deep. And sometimes we've had people brought to tears during this lesson plan by any one of these topics to talk about. What we usually do is have people write these things down so they can reflect on them later, because obviously, depending on the amount of time you have, you couldn't get into a big long discussion about all of these topics. Now, I decided these topics are all in the lesson plan. I decided we really need now to discuss what's going on right now. um, dealing with my husband has a favorite phrase. He's always like, oh, this is a disaster of epic proportions. And it'll be because he, broke a wine glass or something. And then it occurred to me that right now we really are dealing with a disaster of epic proportions. And when we think about our family culture, growing up, I didn't have anything like what is going on right now. The most, I was sharing this on a call yesterday, the most that I learned from my family about dealing with a challenge of epic proportions is what my mom and dad went through during World War II, because there they were in a global war. They were just getting together and they actually fell in love during letters. I have letters that they wrote to each other during the war. She had been his secretary for 3 years, but they had never dated. And then he went off to be in the army, and they wrote letters, and the letters are just wonderful because they start out, dear Helen, dear Gordon, all my best, Helen, all my best, Gordon. And then they move on to dear Helen, love, I love you forever, Gordon. So they fell in love during these letters. And within the letters, you really see what the culture was about back then. One of the things that I realized reading them is that this was a national challenge, and everybody was invested in dealing with this together. It was really important to do all of that rationing of sugar and all of the things that support the troops. And so I think some of those lessons really helped me to get some of my family's culture of how important it is to really feel like you're a part of the bigger picture. So what I'd like to think about now, and let's spend these last few minutes talking about what kind of challenges of epic proportions might you have had in your life? Because many of us have had. I've known people who've had their homes completely blown away by a tornado, or the whole family got killed in a plane crash or whatever. There are things that we have learned that are challenges of epic proportions. And what can we teach and model for our children during this time now of COVID-19? And then most importantly, how can the protective factors help? So that's a lot to think about, but let's think specifically about this time that we're going through, and either for our own children, what we can teach and model for them, and how can resilience and social connection and knowledge of parenting and child development and social and emotional competence and whatever the other one is, how can those 5 things really help us to get through this, and to model the strengths that we have for our children, so that we all can hopefully come out of this on the other side. Think about, and you can either write in the chat box or speak out.
That's a lot to put in a chat box, so I'm going to throw out there.
Yes.
My daughter was supposed to finish elementary school this year. This is not as big a deal as high school, I know, but it was a big deal to her to transition from elementary school to middle school. And it was really intimidating. And she told me, she was kind of sitting very quietly, and we were talking, and she said, Mom, I don't think I'm quite ready to finish elementary school this way. And it was just an attempt on her part to say how she's feeling about this whole situation in a way that is really impacting her directly, and all that we could do, because and we go back on our values and we talk about that, and said, there's a thing about life is that sometimes it comes at you whether you're ready for it or not, but that's okay, because you have a family that's around you, and we're going to help you kind of get through this and walk through this. So you're allowed to feel angry, or you're allowed to feel grief. That's okay, and that's allowed. But we have to think about what we can control and what we can't. So that gave her the opportunity to kind of reflect back. And I asked her what she could control in this situation and how she could choose to handle it. And the big takeaway she came back with is that she thinks when school does go back, she's really going to appreciate it a lot more, because she took for granted how much she likes seeing her friends every day, and what her role is in that. So it was an opportunity for her to reflect on something that's usually kind of a nuisance. I don't know a whole lot of kids who just love getting up and going to school every day, that it gave her an opportunity to see some things she's grateful for. But because we have a communication as a big part of our family, she was comfortable bringing that up, which was hopefully a thing that's going to help her as she grows up and learns that life, it's not always a global pandemic. Sometimes, like, it's an unplanned pregnancy. Sometimes things happen to you in life and you have to be able to adapt. So that was what we really stressed in terms of resiliency.
And I think in your story, not just resiliency, you also talked about social connection, about her meeting, wanting to be with her friends. You talked about social and emotional competence, that you told her that it was okay to be angry or sad or whatever. So, and you probably did the other two too, the concrete support in times of need, and just the fact that you had the conversation shows that you have some knowledge of parenting and child development. So one little story demonstrates all 5 protective factors. I think it's, especially if we're working with families, it's good to pull that out. When they share a story, remind them that these protective factors really are protecting them from being overwhelmed by stress. So anybody else have some ideas of how we can model for our children, and how we can deal with these, even for our children and for ourselves, how we can deal with this life-changing event we're living through right now? Back to your family's culture. Is there anything that your parents did that are helping, that can help?
One thing that we have been doing is blocking off time to make social connections, even if that is through Zoom. So we're a part of a community that's been together for like 20 years. And normally we get together once a month. Since that hasn't been happening, we've been carving out time. The kids get on, the little kids even, and have that connection time through Zoom. We've played games, we played trivia remotely, just to kind of fill that need of, you do need to have that interaction, that social interaction with people, even if it can't be physical right now all the time.
Yeah, I think that has, I think we've learned from this to well, look at what we're doing right now, having this call with all these people. I'm finding it kind of refreshing. You don't have to get in the car and drive somewhere to that you can do these things in the comfort of your own home. So there are a few things that are I think there's some good things that are going to come out of the way we've had to adapt to this. We always like to bring up too that you can learn the protective factors either from having them modeled for you or not. My mother, who was an incredibly wonderful woman, extremely, I get my optimism from her. But at one point when, well, let's see, how old would she have been? Well, she was probably in her late 50s, and her brother and his wife, my uncle and aunt, were killed in a plane crash. And she didn't handle it well. She really, it kind of, she would use the phrase stuck in her craw. It stuck in her craw the rest of her life that we used to be lucky and now we're not lucky anymore. And so as an adult, I've kind of learned to look at that and not feel that way, like, okay, when people say, oh, this terrible thing happened to me, well, terrible things happen to people all the time. I'm not immune, it might happen to me, so I kind of watched the way she handled that challenge and have chosen to handle it differently in my life. So that's also something that can be valuable when you talk with parents and when you do groups and things. That you can learn the lesson either from having it modeled for you or not.
So, Maureen, this is Lavina, and I'm really glad that you said that, because I think about my history of trauma in my life, and my parents never withheld anything from us. They didn't freak us out, but they also didn't keep things from us. And what I see with some parents is, like, when it comes to grief, or right now with COVID, struggling with finances or housing or whatever, and they keep these things from the kids, and in that holding back, what they're teaching their kids is this sense of just don't share, because if you don't share, it's not there. I actually had a 10-year-old tell me that yesterday. If I don't share, it's not there. And
Oh, wow.
one thing with the COVID that's been really helpful for me and the kids is when I'm here, they're here, and they feel this stability because somebody isn't freaking out or panicking about the whole thing. So that's that whole thing of, you know, open to a point, but you don't want to freak your kids out. But parents need to understand that your kids are little sponges and they pick up on a whole heck of a lot more than we even think that they pick up on. So if we're holding in as parents because we're worried about where is our rent going to come from or whatever, those kids get that stress. So working with the parents to help them understand how to have conversations with their kids about the struggles that they deal with is going to help the kids in the long run when they become adults and have similar struggles themselves.
Yeah.
So it's not, you know, not a complete transparency, but a transparency to a point where parents can feel more comfortable talking with their kids. And what I really liked about the Strong is the emphasis on the positives. There's a lot of things that parents are doing really well that they don't always see that they're doing well. And they need somebody to point out to them, hey, this is going good for you. You know, ride that wave, go with it.
Yeah.
So anyhow, I'll get off of my soapbox now.
No, thank you. I mean, that's it's just really valuable to um, to share and to remind all of us. So, as I said,
Could I throw in, Florina just threw in what I also has been thinking about too, is that racism is a big topic in our household lately due to current events. The reasons there are protests, counter protests, and what we can do as individuals, the importance of voting, being informed, of fighting stereotypes by talking to others who don't necessarily agree with us because there is lack of understanding.
mm-hmm.
And that certainly is a challenge of epic proportions, probably the one that's going to last even longer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I have two boys. So I have two Hispanic boys, and both are teenagers. Well, my youngest is 14, my oldest is 20. And so we've been talking about it a lot lately, especially with everything going on, you know, just about how people might perceive them right off the bat, and how to kind of not take that personally, and how to teach, how to inform people, right? Because I tell them a lot, people are scared of what they don't know, right? So it's up, unfortunately, I feel like a lot of that is up to us to show. I mean, it's not fair. And we talk about that as well, but we do talk about how, you know, we set the example, and to be good examples, and to, again, be informed. And I talk to my 20-year-old a lot about voting, and talking to his friends about voting, and about being informed, you know, and knowing the difference between a reliable source and a not reliable source. You know, you can't just look at Facebook for your news. That's not not accurate. So, but yeah, it's definitely a big topic, and we discuss it a lot. And I think it really helps that they feel like they can ask those questions, and we have that conversation. Um, my my parents are very they're old school, right? And so they don't like to talk about topics that are uncomfortable. So it's definitely different here at our house.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting observation too, because you know, some people grew up in families where, oh, there was, you know, active discussion about the world events at the dinner table, and that wasn't my family.
Yeah.
We didn't talk about things like that. If we disagreed on things, we just didn't talk about it. And I still don't like to talk about things that I don't agree with, you know. It's like, oh well, you know, you have your opinion, I have mine. I'm not gonna get into this, you know. Were there any more things that came up, Roger, before we move on to the next slide?
It's just one that said open communication and oh, okay. I like Lavina's comments. We think about some topics like what did Lavina say? I'm sorry if I missed something, but I like Lavina's comments. Okay, what she said. We think about some topics like a bowling ball. When we talk to them about sex, racism, or anything, we always give them a bowling ball they can carry. That's interesting. I think we
Well,
could play that
let
one
me
out.
like explain that. So when my kids were 5 and they ask where babies come from, we're not going to explain that
Right.
in really heavy terms. So you give them something they can carry, without you want to be honest with them and transparent with them, but you also don't want to. I'm not going to explain that to them when they're 5. When they're 12 and going into middle school and they're asking why girls are cussing on the bus and describing things they do with boys, it's a different conversation. So we try to think about the weight. We like to the weight of information and think about what is it that they can really carry at this point and make sure that it's appropriate for their level of development. So it's open communication, but it's not adult communication because they're not adults.
Yeah, that is knowledge of parenting and child development, to know exactly what is going on at whatever age. So was there something else coming up, Roger? And then I think we need to.
Yeah, several of these just were, you know, we're praising Whitney's. That's great. Good analogy.
Oh,
That's a
okay.
really great analogy. So
Yeah, I really like it. So
I was just thinking, Maureen, just in my own head, I was just, I'll give you say, I decided that you and I must come from the opposite family, that ours, we could only talk about things that we, politics and religion.
Oh,
And
okay.
we always talked about things we could argue about. It's great.
Yeah, we didn't do that. So so at the end of this lesson plan, as always, we have lots and lots of questions to help bring this into people's own lives and their own planning and doing. So if you're doing these kind of activities with parents, some of the questions you ask is, if you have a co-parent, what are the challenge of blending your cultures? That is, oh boy, you can do you can do 3 hours on that, you know. Like somebody said before, they were late with mom and on time with dad or whatever, you know, those two cultures are in the same household. Are there items below the water that you'd like to think more about? Often when you start looking at all of these and figuring out where these attitudes came from, you might want to think more about them. And if you decide to change some parenting practices, you begin, and how does culture relate to the protective factors? And then for professionals, for those of us working with families, how does your culture relate to the cultures of those with whom you work? This can be interesting. You know, if you're doing a parenting class or doing a presentation somewhere and you realize that, you know, the place you're coming from is very different from the place of your audience, you know, and how do you deal with that and respect things? What everyday actions can you employ to celebrate the cultures of your clients and your co-workers? What kind of a work situation do you have? And I love this. Does the culture of your workplace support the development of the protective factors? And if not, how could it be improved? Sometimes if you have the opportunity to talk about some of these cultural influences during a staff meeting or something, you can come up with the idea of, gee, are we actively supporting each other to create and thrive with the 5 protective factors? So we don't have time to really go through any of those, but if it, with 2 minutes left, does anybody have any ideas of any of these questions that popped up? Anything float your boat you'd like to comment on? These are all ways that we can apply what we've just been talking about.
Going
Do we have
once.
access to this deck?
What was that?
Do we have access to this deck
Yeah, actually,
or some of this
well,
information?
I could give you the PowerPoint deck. I'm actually, after I do these, I redo, but well, here I'll go ahead and show you what I do. So we always end with a keep, change, add form that we have people decide what they're going to keep, change, or add. This lesson plan will be posted on my YouTube channel, which is Online Strong. The easiest way to get to it is to go to butterflyttt.com and then Online Strong thing, and all the lesson plans. I think I'm up to 12 or 13 lesson plans that are on there now. And I also, if you don't have the Strong book, I can send you the lesson plan. And if you want the lesson plan, I can also send I don't have any what do you call them? Any PowerPoints that go along with the lesson plan. I make those special for this. But I'd be happy to share it with you if you just send me an email. You can send it to onlinestrong1@gmail.com. And I think that is going to be about it. There's 5 protective factors that keep families strong. We have them all. So any final words from anybody? I think I'm coming in on time. It's 3 o'clock.
3 o'clock. I'm going to just make a couple of things. I mean, so also Maureen's website is linked to the Hope Conquers Aces YouTube channel that we have. And so so you can get it there. You can get it on her website, and you can get it on her YouTube channel. So all of those places, we have those. I think several of you may be using the Strong book. Is that correct, to do some parenting training going forward? So I think we'll probably get more deep into that as well. There it is, the Strong book. So we know some people are doing that. Next week, next Tuesday, we have a webinar on or web workshop on TBRI, on the trauma-based relational intervention that is a healing practice, a trauma-informed healing practice, and that's going to be with Michelle Batten next Tuesday at 1 o'clock. So that's about it. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you all. Thanks for the good discussion too. I wish we could